Say it again, he whispered against my ear, voice low and steady, like he already owned the answer. Tell me you don't feel this. I woke up with my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside out, my breath coming in shallow pulls as if the air itself had turned too thick to swallow. And the first thing I noticed wasn't the cold leather beneath my fingers or the dim emergency lights flickering overhead. It was the scent, sharp and warm and unmistakably not mine, wrapping around me like something alive, something that had already decided I belonged to it. No. This wasn't happening. My hand flew to my neck before I could stop it, fingers brushing over skin that felt too sensitive, too aware, like every nerve had been turned up to max volume, and I froze when I felt it. A faint, raised warmth just below my jaw, not painful, not sharp, but there, real, undeniable. My stomach dropped somewhere near my feet. This was wrong. This was all wrong. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing my brain to catch up, to make sense of it, to file it under stress, under heat, under anything that wasn't what it felt like, because it couldn't be what it felt like. It couldn't be him. The memory hit in fragments, jagged and out of order, the elevator doors sliding shut, the hum of the building going quiet, the way the air had shifted before I even realized what was happening, like pressure building before a storm, and then the heat, sudden and overwhelming, crashing through me without warning, stealing the ground out from under my feet. I told myself it was just a heat, just bad timing, just my body malfunctioning like it always did when I pushed it too far. I could handle it. I always handled it. Except this time, I hadn't been alone. A slow, steady breath echoed somewhere to my left, controlled, measured, completely at odds with the chaos still clawing through my chest, and I didn't need to look to know who it was. Adrian Cole. Of course it had to be him. My boss. My personal nightmare. The one person in the entire city I would have chosen to avoid in a situation like this. And yet somehow, the universe had locked us in a metal box and flipped every possible switch just to watch me fall apart in front of him. My jaw tightened, fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as I forced myself to turn my head, slow, cautious, like sudden movement might make this worse, might make it more real. He was there. Of course he was. Sitting a few feet away, back against the wall, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms dusted with faint veins, his posture relaxed in a way that didn't make any sense, like he hadn't just watched me lose control of my own body hours ago. His hair was slightly out of place, his usually perfect composure cracked just enough to feel dangerous, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were already on me, dark and unreadable, like he'd been waiting for me to wake up. "You're awake," he said, voice calm, almost too calm, like none of this surprised him at all. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my mind scrambling for something to say, anything that didn't sound like panic wrapped in denial. This was just a heat, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended, like if I said them fast enough, confidently enough, they might become true. That's all. It didn't mean anything. The silence that followed stretched tight, thin, ready to snap, and then he exhaled slowly, one hand lifting just slightly as if he wanted to reach for me, then stopping himself halfway. "Ethan," he said, my name low and steady, and something in my chest twisted in response, traitorous and immediate. If that were true, his gaze flicked, just for a second, to the place where my fingers still pressed against my neck. "You wouldn't still feel it." My breath hitched before I could stop it. And that was the moment it finally settled, heavy and irreversible, sinking deep into my bones like something that had always been there, just waiting to wake up. This wasn't just a heat. I wasn't just stuck with him for one night. I was bonded to the one person I hated most. I shook my head before he could finish, like I could physically dislodge the truth from my skull if I just refused hard enough, my fingers digging harder into my neck as if I could erase the sensation by force. But it only made it worse, sharper, more real, like every nerve was leaning into his presence whether I wanted it to or not. "No," I said quickly, too quickly, my voice uneven in a way I hated. "No, that is not what this is. Bonds do not just happen like that. There are protocols, there are conditions." I pushed myself upright, the movement sending a strange ripple through my body, not pain, not exactly, but something that made me pause for half a second too long, like my balance was tied to something outside of me now. Outside of me. Him. The realization hit again, heavier this time, and I swallowed it down before it could show on my face. Adrian did not move. He just watched me, eyes steady, like he was cataloging every reaction, every shift, every tiny betrayal my body made against my words. "You think I do not know that?" he said finally, his tone quiet but edged with something tighter underneath. "You think I would say it if I was not certain?" I let out a sharp breath, a humorless laugh slipping through before I could stop it. "You are certain," I repeated, like the word itself was ridiculous. "You, of all people, are suddenly an expert on something like this?" That got a reaction. Small, almost invisible, but I saw it. His jaw tightened, just slightly, and his gaze flickered away for a fraction of a second before locking back onto me. "I did not say suddenly," he replied, and there was something in the way he said it that made my chest tighten for reasons I did not want to examine. I pushed that feeling away just as fast. "It was a heat," I insisted, forcing the words out slower this time, more controlled, like I could build a wall with them if I stacked them carefully enough. "My suppressants have been unstable for weeks. This is not the first time my body has reacted badly. You were just there." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Not because they were wrong, but because of the way his expression changed, not dramatically, not obviously, just a subtle shift, like something closed off behind his eyes. "Just there," he echoed, softer now, and for a second the space between us felt smaller, tighter, like the air had shifted again. I looked away first. I had to, because if I did not, I might notice the way my chest was reacting to that tone, to that look, and I refused to give that any space in my head. "This goes away," I added, more to myself than to him. "Heat always goes away. Whatever you think you are feeling, whatever this is," my voice faltered, just for a second, and I hated that he probably caught it. "It will reset." Silence stretched again, and then he moved. Just one step closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough that I felt it, that invisible pull tightening in my chest, my breath catching before I could control it. His scent was stronger now, not overwhelming, not suffocating, but present, steady, like it had settled into the air and decided to stay. "Then test it," he said quietly. I frowned, my brain lagging half a beat behind. "What?" His gaze dropped again, briefly, to my neck, then back up, steady, unyielding. "If it is just a heat, your system will stabilize. Your body will reject it." He paused, just long enough for the next words to land harder. "But if it does not?" I felt my pulse spike under my fingertips. "Then you already know what that means." I opened my mouth to argue, to shut it down, to throw something sharp enough to cut through this entire conversation, but nothing came out. Because deep down, under the denial, under the panic, under everything I was trying to hold together, there was a quiet, terrifying awareness settling in, piece by piece, like a puzzle I did not want to complete. And the worst part was not that I might be wrong. It was that my body already knew I was. My silence stretched too long, and I hated that he could see it, that he could read the hesitation I was trying so hard to bury. So I did the only thing I could think of to regain control. I stood up too fast, and immediately regretted it when the world tilted just slightly, not enough to make me fall, but enough to remind me that something was off, something inside me no longer moving in a way I recognized. I steadied myself against the cold metal wall, the chill grounding for half a second before that same warmth coiled back under my skin, persistent, stubborn, like it refused to be ignored. "Fine," I said, sharper now, clinging to the edge of defiance like it was the only solid thing left. "You want to test?" We tested. Adrian did not answer right away, but I felt his attention sharpen, like the air itself shifted toward me, focused, waiting. I pushed off the wall and took a step away from him, then another, putting distance between us, needing it, needing space to think, to breathe, to prove that whatever this was did not control me. 3 feet. 4. 5. It should have been enough. It should have felt normal. It did not. The first thing I noticed was my breathing. It changed. Subtle. But there, like my lungs were working harder for the same air, like something was missing from it. I clenched my jaw and kept going, forcing my body forward, ignoring the strange, tightening pull in my chest that grew with every inch of distance. "This is nothing," I told myself. "This is just residual heat. It will pass." Except it did not pass. By the time I reached the far corner of the elevator, The sensation had sharpened into something I could not ignore anymore. Not pain, not exactly, but a hollow tension, like a stretched wire humming under my skin, and without thinking, my hand went back to my neck again, fingers pressing against that spot like it might explain everything if I just focused hard enough. It did not. It only made me more aware of it. Behind me, I heard him move. One step. Slow. Measured. And the moment he did, something in my chest eased. Just slightly. Just enough to make my stomach drop. No. I froze, my back still turned to him, my mind racing, rejecting the implication before it could fully form. This was not real. This was not happening. I took another step forward, stubborn, desperate, and the tension snapped tighter, stealing half a breath from my lungs, my fingers curling against the wall as I exhaled sharply. Stop, Adrian said, his voice low, not a command, not quite, but close enough that it sent a ripple through me anyway. You are pushing it. I laughed, short and strained. Good. I shot back, even as my voice betrayed me, even as my body refused to follow through with the confidence I was trying to project. That is the point, right? To prove you are wrong. He did not respond immediately, and somehow that made it worse, the quiet stretching between us until I could feel his presence without even turning around, steady and unyielding, like he was already certain of how this would end. Ethan, he said again, softer this time, and I hated the way my name sounded coming from him right now, hated the way it settled somewhere too deep, too close to that fragile, shifting place inside me. Come back. My grip tightened on the wall. No. The word came out weaker than I intended. I swallowed hard, forcing my shoulders back, forcing myself to take one more step, just one, just enough to prove that I could. The moment I did, the world seemed to tilt again, not physically, but internally, like something inside me pulled tight, and then tighter, my breath hitching as that hollow tension turned sharp, insistent, impossible to ignore. I sucked in a breath, but it did not feel like enough, like the air itself was missing something essential, something I had not realized I needed until now. And that was when it hit me. Not like a realization, not like a thought, like a certainty. This was not fading. It was not stabilizing. It was not going away. Slowly, unwillingly, I turned my head just enough to look back at him, my chest rising and falling unevenly, my denial cracking in places I could not patch fast enough. He had not moved closer. He was still standing where I left him, watching me, calm, steady, like he already knew exactly what I was feeling before I did. And the worst part was not the distance. It was what happened when I closed it. Because the moment I took a step back toward him, just one, just enough to test it the other way, the tension eased instantly, like something inside me finally settled into place, my breath coming easier without permission, my body betraying me in the most undeniable way possible. I stopped halfway between us, my heart pounding, my thoughts scattering, my certainty gone. This was not a heat. And for the first time, I did not have a single argument left to prove that it was. The silence between us did not feel empty anymore. It felt full, heavy, like it was holding something neither of us was saying out loud, and I hated that I could feel it sitting there, pressing in from all sides, making it harder to pretend this was still something simple, something temporary. I stayed where I was, halfway between him and the wall. Like crossing either direction would mean admitting something I was not ready to face, my fingers slowly lowering from my neck, as if letting go of that point would somehow make it less real, less permanent. It did not. If anything, it made it worse, because now there was nothing to distract from the way my body had already chosen, already aligned itself with something I did not agree to. This does not make sense, I said finally, quieter now, the sharp edge gone, replaced with something more controlled, more dangerous. There are requirements for a bond. Timing, compatibility, consent. The last word lingered longer than the others, and I knew he heard it, because his posture shifted, just slightly, the calm surface cracking for the first time since I woke up. You think I do not know that, he said, his voice lower now, not cold, not distant, but tight, like he was holding something back. I did not plan this. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. That is convenient, I said, lifting my chin just enough to meet his eyes fully now, refusing to look away this time, even though it made that strange, traitorous pull in my chest tighten again. Because from where I am standing, it looks like you benefited from it. The words landed harder than I expected, hanging in the air between us, sharp and accusing. And for a second I thought he would snap back, that he would match my tone, my anger, but he did not. He just looked at me, really looked, and something in his expression shifted in a way I did not understand, something quieter, heavier, like the accusation did not hit where I thought it would. "If you believe that," he said slowly, "then you have not been paying attention." That threw me off more than any argument would have. I frowned, my thoughts stuttering for a second as I tried to catch up, but before I could respond, the elevator lights flickered again, brighter this time, and a low hum vibrated through the floor beneath us. I stilled, my senses snapping to it instantly, the normalcy of that sound almost jarring after everything else. The building was coming back online. Of course it was. The timing felt almost cruel. A sharp beep echoed overhead, followed by the mechanical whir of systems resetting, and for a moment, everything felt suspended, like the world outside this metal box was about to crash back in whether I was ready or not. My chest tightened again, but this time it was not just the bond, not just the connection pulling at me. It was something else, something colder, more practical. Reality. People. Questions. Consequences. I straightened instinctively, pushing my shoulders back, forcing my breathing to even out, trying to pull myself together before the doors opened, before anyone could see me like this, feel this, read it off me like it was written across my skin. "We do not say anything," I said quickly, the words coming out more controlled now, more calculated, like I could rebuild some kind of order if I just moved fast enough. "Not until we know exactly what this is." Adrian did not respond immediately, and I felt that hesitation more than I heard it, the slight pause before he spoke. "Ethan," he said, quieter now, my name carrying something that almost sounded like a warning. I ignored it. I had to. This could be a reaction. I continued, pushing forward, clinging to logic, to anything that sounded like control. A chemical trigger, a faulty suppressant, something external. We confirmed that first. The elevator jolted lightly beneath us, and my heart jumped with it, the sound of the doors unlocking echoing too loud in the small space. I stepped back instinctively, putting just a little more distance between us again, testing it without meaning to, and this time the pull returned instantly, sharper than before, my breath catching before I could hide it. I froze. Of course. Of course it did not wait. Of course it did not care about timing or dignity or anything I needed it to. Behind me, I heard Adrian move again, just one step, closing part of the space I had created, and the tension eased like it had before, immediate and undeniable. I closed my eyes for half a second, steadying myself, hating that this was already becoming predictable, already becoming something I could not argue against. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and the outside world rushed in, bright lights, distant voices, the normal hum of the building like nothing had changed at all. Except everything had. I stepped forward without thinking, and then stopped just at the threshold, something inside me pulling tight again, refusing to let me ignore it completely. I did not turn around, but I did not move further either, because for the first time, stepping away from him did not just feel uncomfortable. It felt wrong. I should have walked out. That was the normal response, the logical one, the one any sane person would choose when given an open door and a chance to pretend none of this had happened. But my feet did not move, not fully, not in the way they were supposed to, like something invisible had caught hold of me just before I could step into the hallway and decided that was far enough. The noise outside felt too loud, too sharp, voices overlapping, footsteps echoing against polished floors, the familiar rhythm of the office building snapping back into place like nothing had ever gone wrong, like there had not just been a moment inside that elevator that rewrote something fundamental in my life. I hated that contrast. I hated that the world kept going. "Ethan." His voice came from behind me, closer now, not touching, not crossing that last line of space, but near enough that I felt it anyway, that subtle shift in the air that my body had already learned to recognize, already reacting to without permission. I closed my eyes for a second, just one, steadying myself, forcing my breathing into something even, something controlled. "You can do this. Just walk. Just leave." I took a step forward. The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic. Not obvious to anyone watching. But inside, it hit like a quiet snap. that same tightening in my chest, that same hollow pull like something essential was being stretched too far, and my breath caught just enough to break the rhythm I had been forcing. I clenched my jaw and kept moving. One more step, then another. Each one felt wrong in a way I could not explain, like I was walking against something instead of through open space, like the air itself resisted me, thick and uncooperative. I made it 3 steps into the hallway before I stopped. Not because I chose to, because I could not push it any further without it becoming obvious, without that subtle strain turning into something everyone could see, something I could not hide. "You are already adjusting," Adrian said quietly behind me, and I hated how calm he sounded, how certain, like this was not new to him, like he had already accepted what I was still trying to dismantle. I turned then, sharper than I intended, my expression tightening as I faced him fully, the distance between us now just enough to make the pull noticeable, but not unbearable. "Do not," I said, my voice low, controlled, but edged. "Do not act like you understand this better than I do." His gaze did not waver. "I understand what I am feeling," he replied simply, "and that should not have affected me the way it did. But it did, something in my chest shifting again, traitorous and immediate." I looked away first. Again, I hated that pattern. Around us, people were starting to notice. Not openly, not obviously, but I could feel the subtle glances, the way conversations dipped just slightly when they passed, the awareness that something was off even if they could not name it. Of course they could not. Bonds had a presence. Not visible, not loud, but there, in the air, in the way two people stood too aware of each other, too connected in ways that did not look normal. I needed to fix this. Fast. "We separate," I said, forcing my focus back, forcing logic into place like armor. "Temporarily, just to confirm the range. If this is real, there will be a threshold." Even as I said it, I already knew the answer, already felt it in the way my body reacted when I shifted half a step further away, the tension returning instantly, sharper this time, less forgiving. I ignored it. "You go upstairs," I continued, voice steady now, professional, like I was discussing a project instead of something that had just altered the foundation of my life. "I will go to medical. We run a full panel. Hormones, suppressants, everything." Adrian watched me for a long second, like he was weighing something I could not see, and then he nodded once. "Fine," he said. Simple. Too simple. Like he was letting me have this illusion of control, because he already knew how it would end. I turned before I could react to that, before I could question it, and started down the hallway again, slower this time, more measured, testing each step, managing the reaction as best as I could, keeping it just below the surface where no one else could see it. It worked. Barely, but it worked. I reached the corner and stopped, just for a second, just long enough to realize something I had not expected. The further I moved, the quieter everything else became. Not the building, not the noise. Him. That steady, grounding presence I had not even realized I was using until it started to fade. I exhaled slowly, my chest tightening again, not as sharp as before, but enough to remind me that this was not something I could outrun. Not anymore. And for the first time, the thought settled in fully, heavy and unavoidable. If this was real, if this bond held the way it felt like it did, then distance was not a solution. It was just a delay. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before, each step measured, controlled, like I was walking a tightrope no one else could see, and I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look back even though every instinct in my body was tracking where he was, how far behind me he stood, whether that invisible line between us had stretched too thin yet. It had not snapped, not completely, but I could feel it straining, a low, constant pressure beneath my ribs that made it harder to focus on anything else, like a background noise that refused to fade no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. I pushed through it. I had to. The medical wing was 3 floors down and across the east corridor, a route I had taken 100 times without thinking, but now every turn felt deliberate, every second stretched, like time itself was aware of what I was trying to do and refused to make it easy. The elevator ride down alone was enough to confirm what I already suspected. The moment the doors closed and the space around me sealed, the absence hit harder, sharper. That steady presence I had been unconsciously leaning on suddenly muted, distant, like a signal cutting in and out, and I sucked in a slow breath, steadying. myself against the wall as I felt it spike and settle in uneven waves. Not unbearable. Not yet. But enough. Enough to make it clear that whatever this was, it had reach. It had structure. It had rules I did not understand. By the time the doors opened again, I had my expression back under control, my posture straight, my breathing even, the version of myself that functioned in this building sliding back into place like armor. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. They never did. That was the benefit of being good at what you did. You learned how to move through spaces without being interrupted, without drawing attention, and right now, that was exactly what I needed. The glass doors of the medical unit slid open with a soft hiss, the sterile scent of antiseptic replacing the lingering traces of everything else, and for the first time since I woke up, something in my mind settled, just slightly, just enough to remind me that logic still existed, that there were still systems in place designed to explain things like this. I could work with that. Ethan. The voice pulled me out of my thoughts, and I turned to see Dr. Patel looking up from her tablet, her expression shifting instantly from casual recognition to something sharper, more focused, like she could already tell something was off before I even said a word. Of course she could. That was her job. You look like you have not slept, she added, setting the tablet aside as she stepped closer, her eyes scanning my face with practiced precision. I forced a neutral expression, the kind I used in meetings, in negotiations, in any situation where giving too much away would cost me. I need a full panel, I said, keeping my voice steady direct. Hormones, suppressants, receptor response, everything. Immediately, her brows drew together slightly. That is a wide request, she said, studying me more carefully now. What happened? I hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel that pull again, faint but present, a reminder that I was not as separated from the situation as I wanted to be. I ignored it. I had an episode, I said instead, choosing the most neutral, clinical phrasing I could. Unexpected onset. High intensity. I need to rule out contamination or failure in my suppressants. That part was not a lie. Not entirely. Dr. Patel held my gaze for a long moment, like she was weighing whether to push further, whether to ask the question I knew was sitting right behind her eyes, but then she nodded once, decisive. All right, she said, already turning toward the exam rooms. Come with me. I followed, the controlled environment helping, grounding, giving me something solid to focus on, something measurable, something that could be tested and explained. That was what I needed. Data. Proof. Not instincts. Not reactions I could not control. As she prepped the room, pulling up screens and equipment with efficient movements, I finally allowed myself one brief glance toward the hallway behind me, toward the direction I had come from, toward the distance I had put between us. The pull was still there. Quieter. Fainter. But present. Persistent. Unresolved. I looked away immediately, my jaw tightening as I forced my attention back to the present, back to the process, back to something I could still control. Because if the results came back clean, if everything pointed to a chemical trigger, a malfunction, something external, then this could still be fixed. It had to be. And if it was not, I pushed that thought down before it could fully form, before it could settle into something real. One problem at a time. That was how I handled everything else. This would be no different. It could not be. The room felt too clean, too controlled, like nothing unpredictable was allowed to exist inside it. And I held on to that, onto the quiet hum of machines and the steady rhythm of clinical routine as Dr. Patel worked, her movements precise as she drew blood, attached monitors, and scanned through my records with practiced efficiency. It should have been reassuring. This was where problems got solved. This was where uncertainty turned into numbers, into charts, into answers that made sense. I focused on that as the seconds ticked by, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the exam table, my posture straight, composed, like I was in a meeting instead of sitting here, trying to prove that my own body had not betrayed me. Heart rate is elevated, she noted, glancing at the screen, her tone neutral but attentive. Hormonal levels, she paused, her brows knitting slightly as she leaned closer, adjusting the display. That small pause was enough to send a ripple of unease through me. What? I asked, sharper than I intended, the word cutting through the sterile air. She did not answer immediately, her eyes scanning the data again, double-checking. and that silence stretched just long enough to make my chest tighten, that now familiar pressure curling beneath my ribs as if it had been waiting for this moment. Your levels are not just elevated, she said finally, slower now, more deliberate. They are synchronized. I frowned. That does not make sense, I said immediately. The words automatic, reflexive, like rejecting them fast enough might undo whatever she was seeing. Synchronized with what? Dr. Patel hesitated, and for the first time since I walked in, she looked at me not just as a patient, but as someone standing at the edge of something she could not simplify. With another profile, she said. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly, not physically, but internally, like something had shifted into place that I had been trying to keep separate. I shook my head once, sharp, dismissive. That is not possible, I said, my voice tightening despite my efforts to keep it even. Cross-synchronization requires established bonding. It cannot just, I stopped. Because I knew what I was about to say, and I knew why I could not finish it. Dr. Patel did not look away. I am aware of the requirements, she said calmly. Which is why I am telling you this is not presenting like a temporary reaction. The words landed heavier than anything else so far. Not a reaction. Not temporary. My fingers curled slightly against the table, the controlled environment suddenly feeling less stable, less certain, like the ground beneath it was shifting in ways I could not quantify. Run it again, I said quickly, pushing forward, clinging to procedure, to repetition, to anything that might produce a different result. Check for interference, contamination, external influence. She nodded once, already moving to rerun the analysis, her expression focused, professional, but there was something else there now too, something quieter, something that made it clear she already knew what the second result would show before the system finished processing. The seconds stretched. The hum of the machine seemed louder, sharper, filling the space in a way that made it harder to think, harder to ignore the subtle, persistent awareness still sitting in the back of my mind, that faint, steady presence that had not disappeared even after all this distance. If anything, it had settled, stabilized, like it was simply waiting. The screen updated. Dr. Patel exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, and then turned it slightly, so I could see. The data was clear. Two patterns. Mirrored. Aligned. Not overlapping. Not fluctuating. Locked. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was looking at even as the evidence sat right in front of me. Undeniable, clinical, precise. This was not theory. This was not instinct. This was measurable. Proven. Real. Ethan, Dr. Patel said quietly, her voice careful now, like she was stepping around something fragile. This is consistent with a bond. The words settled into the room like a weight, final and unmoving. I did not respond. I could not. Because for the first time since this started, there was nothing left to argue against, nothing left to reframe or reinterpret. The data did not lie, and somewhere, just beneath that realization, something else shifted too, something I had been ignoring until now, something that no longer felt like a distant signal or a background noise. It felt closer, stronger, like it had noticed the moment I stopped denying it. And that was when the door behind me opened. The sound of the door sliding open was soft, almost polite, but it cut through the room like a switch flipping, and I felt it before I turned. That shift in the air, that now unmistakable presence threading back into the space like it had always belonged there, like distance had only muted it, never removed it. My breath stalled for half a second, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me to feel the difference immediately, the way that low, constant tension inside my chest eased just slightly, like something had been waiting to realign. I did not want to look. I knew who it was. There was no one else it could be. Doctor. Adrian's voice came, calm and controlled as ever, but closer now, grounded in the same space as me, and that alone made everything sharper, clearer, harder to ignore. Dr. Patel straightened subtly, her posture shifting into something more formal, more measured. Mr. Cole, she acknowledged, her tone professional, but I caught the flicker in her expression, the quick glance between us. The way her attention sharpened just a fraction more than usual. Of course she saw it. Anyone trained enough would. Two profiles aligned. Two people, standing too aware of each other. I forced myself to move then, turning slowly, deliberately, like I could control how much of this showed if I just managed it carefully enough. But the moment my eyes landed on him, The reaction was immediate, instinctive, something I could not filter or disguise. It was not dramatic, not visible, but it was there. That subtle internal shift, that sense of something settling into place just from proximity alone, like a lock clicking into alignment without being asked. I hated it. Adrian's gaze met mine, steady, unreadable, but there was something different there now. Something quieter, less distant than before, like whatever barrier he usually kept in place had thinned just enough to let something else through. "You should not be here," I said before I could stop myself, the words coming out sharper than I intended, a reflex more than a decision, like pushing him away verbally might compensate for what my body refused to do physically. He did not react to the tone. If anything, he seemed to expect it. "You asked for distance," he said evenly. "You have it. This is not a violation of that." I clenched my jaw, the logic irritatingly sound, leaving me with nothing immediate to push back on. Of course, he would follow the letter of what I said, not the intention. That was exactly the kind of thing he would do. Dr. Patel cleared her throat softly, drawing both of our attention back to her, her expression now carefully neutral, but there was no missing the way she was watching us, assessing, connecting the data on the screen to the reality in front of her. "I assume," she said slowly, "that you are the second profile." Adrian did not hesitate. "Yes." The word landed clean, certain, and something in my chest reacted to it instantly. That same subtle tightening followed by release, like my body had just been given confirmation it did not need, but recognized anyway. I exhaled slowly, forcing my focus back to the present, to the conversation, to anything that was not the way my own reactions were betraying me. "There has to be an explanation beyond this," I said, directing it at Dr. Patel, but aware of him standing there, aware of every inch of space between us, aware of how easily it could be closed. External influence. Induced synchronization. Something artificial. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than any immediate answer would have. "It is possible," she said carefully, "but highly unlikely at this level of stability." Stability. The word echoed in my head, heavy and final. Not fluctuating. Not temporary. Stable. I looked at the screen again, at the mirrored patterns, the perfect alignment that should not exist without time, without intention, without choice. Except there had been no choice. That was the part my mind kept circling back to, the part that refused to settle no matter how clear the data was. Adrian stepped closer then, just one step, not enough to invade my space, but enough to shift the air again, enough that I felt it immediately, that internal pull smoothing out like tension being released from a wire wound too tight. I stiffened, my shoulders tightening in response even as the rest of me reacted in the opposite direction, and I hated that contradiction more than anything else. "You wanted confirmation," he said quietly, his voice lower now, closer, grounded in the same space as me. "You have it." I did not look at him. I could not, because if I did, I might have to acknowledge the part of this that was no longer theoretical, no longer deniable. The part that had already changed something fundamental whether I accepted it or not. "This is not over," I said instead, my voice controlled again, precise, like I could carve out some space for myself inside all of this if I just held the line hard enough. "We find the cause. We fix it." The silence that followed was not empty. It was weighted, steady, like something had already decided the answer before I had even finished the sentence. And deep down, somewhere I was still trying to ignore, I already knew that whatever this was, it was not something that could be undone as easily as I wanted it to be. The word fix echoed in my head long after I said it, like if I repeated it enough times it would start to sound real, achievable, something within reach instead of something already slipping through my fingers, and I held on to that as tightly as I could, while everything else tried to pull me in the opposite direction. Dr. Patel did not interrupt, but I could feel her watching, measuring the space between us, the tension that no longer behaved like tension at all, the subtle shifts that were too synchronized to ignore. "If there was an external trigger," she said carefully, stepping toward the console again, pulling up additional layers of data, "it would leave a signature. Synthetic compounds, altered suppressants, receptor overrides. We can check for all of that." I nodded once, sharp, immediate, grateful for something concrete, something procedural. "Do it," I said. "Everything." Adrian remained where he was, but his presence did not fade, not even slightly. If anything, it settled deeper, steadier, like it had anchored itself now that the distance was gone. And I hated that part most of all, the quiet certainty of it. The way my body stopped fighting so hard when he was near, like it had already accepted a conclusion I was still refusing to consider. The machines hummed again, soft and consistent, the screens shifting as new panels opened, chemical breakdowns, neurological patterns, receptor maps layering over each other in clean, clinical precision. This was what I trusted. Not instincts. Not reactions. Data. Measurable, verifiable data. I focused on that, on the numbers, on the patterns, on anything that did not involve turning my head and acknowledging the person standing just a few feet away. There is something else, Dr. Patel said after a moment, her voice quieter now, more focused. I stiffened slightly. What? It was not a question. Not really. She adjusted the display again, isolating a subset of readings, and I saw it before she even explained. A cluster of irregularities sitting just outside the primary alignment, subtle but distinct, like a shadow behind something otherwise perfect. Your suppressants, she said, pointing to the fluctuation. They are not just degraded. They are altered. My mind snapped to that instantly, logic reasserting itself, something I could grab onto, something that made sense in a way the rest of this did not. Altered how? I asked, stepping closer to the screen without thinking, my focus narrowing. The composition is not consistent with your prescribed formula, she replied. There are additional compounds present. Not enough to trigger immediate alarm, but enough to interfere with normal regulation. A cold clarity settled over me, cutting clean through the confusion, the denial, the chaos. This was something I could work with. So it was induced, I said, the conclusion forming fast, sharp, precise. The heat was triggered artificially. That part is possible, she said, her tone cautious again. But that does not explain the bond. The word landed again, heavier this time, because now it was sitting beside something else, something tangible, something that suggested intention, interference, manipulation. I turned slightly, just enough to glance at Adrian, not fully, not completely, but enough to register his expression, still calm, still controlled, but sharper now, more focused, like he had locked onto the same detail I had. Someone tampered with my suppressants, I said, more to myself than to either of them. The pieces starting to align in a different way now, a pattern forming that had nothing to do with instinct and everything to do with design. Which means this was not random. Silence followed that, not empty, but charged, like the direction of everything had just shifted. Dr. Patel did not argue. She did not confirm it outright either, but the way she did not dismiss it was enough. Adrian took one step closer then, just one, and I felt it immediately, that now familiar adjustment, that subtle internal settling that my body seemed to crave even as my mind rejected it. I forced myself to stay still, to not react outwardly, to not give him that. If this was engineered, he said, his voice low, controlled, then whoever did it understood the risk. Risk. That word carried weight now, heavier than anything else so far, because it implied knowledge, intention, a level of precision that made this feel less like an accident and more like a calculated move. I looked back at the screen, at the altered compounds, at the synchronized patterns, at the evidence that refused to separate into neat, solvable pieces. Then we find who did it, I said, my voice steady again, colder now, sharper, something new threading through it beneath the control. Because if this was intentional, I stopped there, not finishing the thought, not needing to. The implication was already clear. This was not just something that happened to me. It was something that was done. And that meant there was someone responsible. The realization settled in fully then, shifting everything once again, changing the problem from something internal to something external, something I could confront, something I could fight. But even as that clarity took hold, even as the direction of my focus sharpened, there was still one piece that refused to move, one variable that remained exactly where it had been from the start, steady, unchanging, impossible to ignore. The bond was still there, and no matter who caused it, that part had not been undone. The realization did not bring relief the way I expected it to. It did not simplify anything or make the situation cleaner. It only shifted the weight, moved it from something internal and uncontrollable to something external and deliberate. And somehow that made it worse, because now there was intent behind it, planning, someone who had looked at a system this complex and decided to interfere anyway. I stared at the screen a moment longer, at the altered compounds highlighted in sterile blue light, and forced myself to step back, to create distance not just physically but mentally, to separate the facts from the reaction building under my skin. "Trace it," I said, my voice steady, controlled, the same tone I used in high-pressure meetings when decisions needed to be made quickly and without hesitation. "Batch number, distribution channel, anything tied to where my suppressants were sourced." Dr. Patel nodded immediately, already pulling up additional data sets, her fingers moving quickly across the interface as she initiated a deeper scan. "If it was tampered with at the source, we might be able to identify a point of alteration," she said. "If it was done post-distribution, that becomes more complicated." "Then we start with what is not complicated," I replied, not taking my eyes off the screen, because looking away meant acknowledging everything else in this room that I still did not want to face. The pull was still there, steady and grounded, no longer sharp or overwhelming, but present in a way that made ignoring it feel like trying to ignore gravity. Adrian had not moved again, but I was aware of him in a way I could not turn off, like my senses had recalibrated around his presence whether I wanted them to or not. "Your supply chain is internal," he said after a moment, his voice cutting through the quiet with that same calm precision he used in every boardroom, every negotiation. "Your prescriptions are filled through company-approved vendors." I stiffened slightly, the implication immediate. "You think this came from inside?" It was not a question. He did not hesitate. "I think it is the most efficient point of access," he replied. Efficient. The word landed cold, clinical, exactly the kind of logic he would apply to a situation like this, and under any other circumstance I would have argued it, pushed back, challenged the assumption. Now I could not, because it made sense. Too much sense. I exhaled slowly, my mind already moving through the possibilities, narrowing them down, eliminating variables, building a list of access points, of people, of opportunities. "Then we audit," I said. "Every step, every handler, every record." The clarity of it steadied me, gave me something solid to focus on, something that did not involve the constant, subtle awareness of the man standing just a few feet away. Dr. Patel glanced between us, her expression tightening slightly, like she was recognizing the shift in direction, the way this had just become something larger than a medical anomaly. "I will pull what I can from the internal system," she said. "But if this involves corporate channels, you will need authorization." Adrian stepped forward then, just enough to enter my peripheral space fully, and the reaction was immediate, that internal alignment smoothing out again, like tension releasing without permission, and I hated that my body responded before my mind could block it. "You have it," he said simply. Of course he would say that. Of course he would take control of the situation the moment it expanded beyond something clinical. That was what he did. That was who he was. I turned slightly, finally meeting his gaze fully again, and this time I did not look away, even as that quiet, steady connection between us pressed in closer, more defined now, harder to ignore. "This does not change anything," I said, my voice low, firm, every word deliberate. "Whatever caused this, however it happened, we deal with that first." His expression did not shift, but something in his eyes sharpened, like he understood exactly what I was not saying. "And the rest?" he asked quietly. The question lingered, heavier than it should have been, because there was no easy answer to it anymore, no clean separation between cause and effect, between problem and consequence. I held his gaze for a second longer, then looked back at the screen, at the data, at the only part of this I could still approach logically. "We will address that after," I said finally. It sounded controlled. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a plan. But even as I said it, I could feel the truth sitting just beneath it, steady and unyielding. This was not something that could be handled in steps. Not something that could be neatly divided into before and after. Because no matter what we found, no matter who was responsible, no matter how this started, one thing had not changed. We were still bound. And there was no system, no protocol, no procedure on that screen that told me how to undo that. The room did not feel like a place for answers anymore. It felt like a place where facts were laid out in neat rows while the truth sat somewhere just beyond them, heavier, harder to contain, and I could feel it pressing in the longer we stood there, the longer I tried to pretend this was still something I could manage with logic alone. Dr. Patel moved quietly at the console, pulling data, cross-referencing supply chains, her focus shifting fully into investigation mode. And for a moment, the sound of her typing was the only thing grounding me, the only thing that made this feel like a process instead of a situation spiraling beyond control. I needed that. I needed something to move forward. I am flagging your last 3 prescription refills, she said without turning, her voice steady but more serious now. There is a discrepancy in the 3rd batch. It does not match the formulation of the previous 2. My attention snapped to that instantly, my thoughts narrowing again, sharpening, because this was something I could follow. Timeline, I said. When was the 3rd batch issued? 48 hours ago, she replied. Delivered through internal courier. Logged and signed. 48 hours. My mind moved fast, slotting that into place, mapping it against everything that had happened since, every meeting, every interaction, every moment where something could have been altered without my awareness. Then whoever did this knew exactly when to intervene, I said, more to myself than anyone else, the clarity cutting through the noise. They did not just tamper with the compound. They timed the exposure. Adrian shifted beside me, not closer, not further, but present in a way that felt deliberate now, like he was matching my focus, aligning with the same line of thought. That narrows the field, he said. Access to your prescriptions is restricted. Delivery logs can be traced. Surveillance can confirm handling points. I nodded once, already moving through the implications, already building a framework, a plan, something that could be executed. Then we start with the courier, I said. Identify who handled the batch last. Cross-check with system access. Anyone who had proximity and clearance. Dr. Patel paused, just briefly, and when she spoke again, there was something different in her tone, something more cautious. There is one more thing, she said. I felt it before she even finished, that subtle shift, that tightening under my ribs that had nothing to do with distance this time, and everything to do with what was about to be said. The alteration in your suppressants is not random, she continued. The compounds are designed to destabilize regulation temporarily, but also to amplify compatibility response. I went still, completely still. The words did not make sense at first, not in the way she said them, not in the way they connected to everything else, but then they did, all at once, like a pattern snapping into place too fast to stop. Amplify compatibility. Not create. Not force. Amplify. My stomach dropped, a cold realization settling in deeper than anything before it. You are saying, I started, my voice quieter now, slower, like I needed to control every word to keep it from spiraling, that this did not create the bond. Dr. Patel met my gaze then, steady, direct. I am saying it made it easier for one to form, she corrected. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had shifted just enough to make everything closer than it should be. I did not look at Adrian. I could not. Because if that was true, if this had not been entirely artificial, if it had not been forced from nothing but instead pushed something that was already possible into reality, then that changed everything. That meant this was not just a mistake, not just an accident, not just something done to me. It meant my body had responded. It meant there had been compatibility. It meant that under the right conditions, even without interference, something like this could have happened anyway. No, I said immediately, the word sharp, instinctive, cutting through the thought before it could take root. That does not matter. But it did. I knew it did. The way the silence settled afterward made that clear. The way Adrian did not interrupt, did not argue, did not confirm, just stood there, steady and present, like he already understood what I was refusing to accept. My fingers curled slightly at my sides, tension returning in a different form now, not the pull of distance, not the strain of separation, but something internal, something tied to the realization itself. We focus on the cause, I said again, forcing the words into place, forcing the direction back to something I could control. Whoever did this, that is what matters. It sounded solid. It sounded certain. But beneath it, quieter, harder to ignore now, was something else entirely. Because if the bond had only been amplified, not created, then the question was no longer just who caused it. It was why it worked. The word why did not leave me. It did not fade into the background like everything else I tried to compartmentalize. It stayed, sharp and persistent, threading through every thought no matter how tightly I tried to lock everything down, and I hated that more than anything, because it was not a question I could solve with data alone. I forced myself to move, to break the stillness that had settled too heavily in the room, stepping back from the screen, from the clean lines and measured certainty that had just unraveled into something far more complicated. "We proceed as planned," I said, my voice steady again, controlled, like I could still dictate the direction if I just kept moving forward. "Trace the courier. Pull access logs. I want every point of contact mapped within the last 72 hours. Dr. Patel nodded, already working, her focus shifting fully into execution, but I could feel her awareness lingering, the way she did not need to say anything more to understand that this had crossed from clinical into something else entirely. Adrian remained beside me, not crowding, not closing the last inch of space, but close enough that the connection between us stayed stable, quiet now, almost deceptively calm, like it had settled into a rhythm it had no intention of breaking. I hated how easily my body adapted to that. How? The tension I had been fighting since this began no longer spiked as sharply, no longer demanded immediate resistance, but instead lingered as something constant, something that felt less like an intrusion and more like an adjustment. That was worse, much worse, because it meant this was not fading. It was integrating. "We will need discretion," Adrian said, his voice low, measured, pulling my attention back to something practical, something I could work with. "If this is internal, alerting the wrong people too soon compromises the investigation." I nodded once, already aligning with that logic, already shifting into strategy. "Then we keep it contained," I said. "Limited access. Direct oversight." He did not argue. Of course he did not. This was his territory as much as mine: control, precision, calculated movement, and for a moment, just a moment, we were aligned in a way that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with how we worked. The realization hit before I could stop it, subtle but sharp, and I immediately pushed it away, refusing to let it settle into something that made sense of the other part of this, the part one was still actively rejecting. "Ethan." My name, quieter now, closer, and I turned before I could stop myself, meeting his gaze fully again, and there it was, that same steady presence, that same unreadable depth that no longer felt distant the way it used to, no longer felt like something I could dismiss as cold or detached. It felt focused, on me. I stiffened slightly, the awareness of that settling deeper than I wanted it to. "What?" I said, sharper than necessary, the reflex automatic, defensive. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, and in that second, something shifted, something unspoken, something that did not belong in a boardroom or a clinical setting or anywhere that logic was supposed to be enough. "You are pushing yourself too far," he said finally. I almost laughed at that, the sound catching somewhere between disbelief and irritation. "I am functioning," I replied, my tone clipped, controlled. "That is all that matters right now." But even as I said it, I could feel the slight tremor in my hands, the way my body was still adjusting, still recalibrating, still responding to something I could not override no matter how hard I tried. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze flicked, just briefly, to my hands, then back to my face, and something in his expression tightened, not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to catch, but enough that I saw it, enough that I felt it. "This is not just a problem to solve," he said, quieter now, more deliberate. "It affects you." The words should not have mattered. They should have been obvious, unnecessary, something I could dismiss without a second thought. Instead, they landed heavier than they should have, because they were not just about the situation. They were about me, and that was not something I was prepared to deal with. "I am aware," I said, my voice colder now, sharper, a clear line drawn to push that angle away. "Which is exactly why I am handling it." Silence followed, but it was different this time, not tense, not uncertain, but steady, like something had settled into place between us that neither of us was acknowledging directly. I turned back to the screen, to the data, to the only part of this that still followed rules I understood, but even as I did, I could feel it, that quiet, constant connection, no longer fighting me, no longer clashing against my resistance, just there, waiting. And for the first time since this started, I realized something that made everything else shift again, something that sat beneath the logic, beneath the strategy, beneath every attempt I had made to frame this as a problem with a solution. The more I fought it, the more I tried to isolate it, to control it, to treat it like something external, the more it adapted. The more it stayed. And the worst part was not that it was not going away. It was that it no longer felt like it wanted to. The room did not change. The machine still hummed. The screen still displayed clean, precise data. Dr. Patel still worked with quiet efficiency in the background. But something else had shifted, something that had nothing to do with numbers or systems or anything I could quantify. And I felt it settle in the space between us, steady and undeniable, like a line that had already been drawn whether I acknowledged it or not. I kept my eyes on the screen for a moment longer, forcing myself to focus on the investigation, on the courier. Logs Dr. Patel was pulling up on the names and timestamps that could lead to answers, because that was what I needed. Answers, something external, something actionable, something that did not involve turning around and facing the part of this that no longer fit into any system I understood. There, Dr. Patel said quietly, highlighting a section of the data. The courier assignment was rerouted. Last-minute authorization override. My attention snapped to it instantly, the clarity returning, sharp and precise. By who? I asked, already leaning closer, already locking onto the detail that mattered. She expanded the entry, her expression tightening slightly as the authorization ID resolved into something identifiable. Executive clearance, she said. Level 1. My stomach dropped, not from confusion this time, but from recognition, because Level 1 clearance was not broad, it was not accessible, it was limited to a handful of individuals at the very top of the system. I straightened slowly, the implications settling in with a weight that felt heavier than anything else so far. That narrows it, Adrian said beside me, his voice calm, but sharper now, more focused, like he had already reached the same conclusion. I turned to him fully then, no hesitation this time, no avoidance, because there was no room for it anymore. It narrows it to your level, I said, the words direct, controlled, but edged with something that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with the situation unfolding in front of us. His gaze did not waver. And yours, he replied. That landed harder than I expected, not because it was wrong, but because it forced the circle even tighter, forced the possibilities into something uncomfortably close. A handful of names. A handful of access points. No room for coincidence. Then someone with direct access chose this, I said, my voice quieter now, more deliberate, because this was no longer just interference. This was targeted. Intentional. Personal. The word lingered in my mind longer than I wanted it to. Dr. Patel stepped back slightly, giving us space without saying it outright, her role shifting from primary to observer as the situation moved beyond her scope. I barely noticed. My focus had narrowed completely now, locked onto the reality of what we were dealing with. We pulled a list, I said. Everyone with Level 1 clearance who had system access in the last 72 hours. We cross-referenced location, activity, authorization logs. Adrian nodded once, already aligned, already moving in the same direction without needing further explanation. That should not have felt as natural as it did. It should not have felt as seamless as it was. And yet it did. The realization hit again, quieter this time, but deeper, threading through everything else whether I wanted it to or not. I exhaled slowly, forcing that thought down, forcing myself to stay on track, because this was what mattered, this was what I could control. We find them, I said, my voice firm again, decisive, something solid in the middle of everything that was not. Adrian stepped closer then, just enough to stand fully beside me, not behind, not in front, but next to me, and the shift was immediate, that internal alignment settling completely, like something clicking into place that had been slightly off since I walked out of the elevator. I stilled, just for a second, just long enough to feel it fully, to recognize it without denying it. And for once, I did not step away. I did not create distance. I just stood there, aware of it, aware of him, aware of how natural it suddenly felt despite everything I had been fighting against. We will, he said quietly, his voice steady, certain, and for the first time, it did not feel like control. It felt like something else entirely. I did not respond immediately. I could not. Because as much as I wanted to focus on the investigation, on the answers, on the person responsible for all of this, There was something else settling in at the same time, something that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with us. The bond had not weakened. It had not resisted. It had adapted. It had stabilized. And standing there, in a room built on logic and proof, I finally understood something I had been refusing to see from the beginning. This was not just something I was stuck with. It was something I was going to have to live with. And whether I liked it or not, whether I fought it or not, whether I understood it or not, one thing was already certain. I was not facing it alone.